Our political editor Jane Patterson joins us now live from our gallery office. Jane, this is a change of heart, isn't it? Or is it a preemptive move so that the government can head off what may appear by saying, hey, we're having an inquiry?
Look, I think this is a very political move. All of last week, the government was defending New Zealand's tax and trust structure, saying there's nothing wrong with it, it's very robust, it's legitimate, and there was no point last week at all when they were considering or signalled that they would have a review, an inquiry, and of course that was being called for all last week. So this afternoon at his post-cabinet news conference, Mr Key said they will have a review. It's one person, a tax expert, so it's well short of a full-blown inquiry. But also in the same breath he's saying New Zealand is not a tax haven. They don't believe anything is wrong with the structure, but he did say if there were shortcomings identified, the government would be willing to look at changing the law if necessary.
So he's having a review, but he seems to have predetermined that the review won't find that New Zealand is a tax haven. So what is the review going to focus on?
Really around disclosure rules. So at the moment, if there's a foreign trust in New Zealand, it has to name the trustee and the name of the trust. Now, it does actually have more details that it has on hand if the IRD comes calling. So that's going to be the main look at the review. So do trusts have to give enough information up front, and also whether the IRD has the power and the ability to really get in there and look deeper if there are question marks over a particular trust, or if they have a request from another jurisdiction about a particular trust operating here in New Zealand.
So, Joan, that's the kind of thing John Shewan will be looking at. Has that appeased in any way the concerns being raised by opposition parties?
Look, there have been some criticisms. One of them is actually about the appointment of John Shewan himself. He is a well-respected tax expert with a long history and lectures at Victoria University, but he was involved in 2009 with a case where Westpac was done for $1 billion for a tax avoidance case. Maybe more to come on that, but also just the actual review itself. The opposition parties may be predictably saying it's not full enough, this should be much broader, and they're criticising the fact it's sort of a closed door inquiry, so it's not going to be conducted in the public, and questions about whether the appointment of Mr Shewan is actually to get a result that the government is after.
Yeah, Jane, I can see your colleague Chris Bramble working behind you there, and she's filing on the opposition reaction for after 6 o'clock, so we'll have that report after the 6 o'clock news. Politicians around the world, of course, most obviously David Cameron, are really feeling the heat on this. Is there a sense that this is going to extend to New Zealand?
Well, John Key was the first person that we asked this of on Morning Report this morning. He was questioned about it. He's actually come out even more strongly this afternoon, saying that his tax affairs are absolutely clean, they're absolutely above board, and have been since he was Prime Minister and before he was Prime Minister. He says he does operate a blind trust that has come up in the news media before, and he said that basically he has to trust that the people running that are doing the right thing. He did say that he hopes they're not stupid enough to be doing anything with dodgy trusts, but he's sure that they're not. So really putting that to bed in terms of any potential skeletons in his closet, especially coming from the sort of world of high finance. And today we have contacted all 121 MPs asking them if they have had any connection at all with a foreign trust, either now or in the past. So far we've had 61 responses, and that's including party leaders. No one has declared any interest in any trust except the Green MP Mojo Mathers, and she says that she is the beneficiary of a family trust set up by her late grandmother, and that allows her to go and holiday in Cornwall in the holiday home, but no other benefit.
Jane Patterson, our political editor, thank you very much indeed, Jane. Jane joining us live from the gallery office, and Chris Bramble will be filing on opposition reaction to John Shewan's appointment and the terms of reference of his inquiry after 6 o'clock. Whatever the current regime, whatever is eventually revealed about New Zealand by the Panama Papers, and whatever John Shewan concludes, it is clear this government did look at how to turn New Zealand into what they called, and I quote, an international funds domicile. To look at this, we're going to use the government's own words from the government's own papers. In the first instance, we're going back 6 years. On the 19th of March 2010, Cabinet agreed to the establishment of the International Funds Services Development Group, the IFSDG. On the 14th of February 2011, so 11 months later, Jerry Brownlee, in his role as Minister for Economic Development, sent a report to the chair of the Cabinet Business Committee detailing that group's work. Although he's not named in the report, the committee's chair was, and still is, John Key. Now, this is a verbatim quote from that report.
The IFSDG was asked to report back to the government on what would be required for New Zealand to successfully position and market itself as an international funds domicile.
There was some excitement about what the successful positioning of New Zealand as an international funds domicile might be worth. Again, this is a verbatim quote.
Officials consider that there is potential for significant benefits from the funds domicile initiative.
There was talk of
2,000 to 5,000 high-value jobs such as accountants, lawyers and trustees.
this was being seriously considered. The IFSDG was chaired by Craig Stobo, who in 2009 had told the government's Jobs Summit, quote, a zero tax rating for foreign investors, end quote, would give the country an economic boost. The other members of the advisory group were Troy Bowker, an investment banker with experience in New Zealand, New York and London, Mark Fitzgerald, whose experience ranges from Citigroup to Westpac to the NZUS Council, Hugh Stevens, banker and a master's graduate from the London Business School, and Sam Stubbs, whose CV includes being Tower's chief executive of Hanover Finance, and working with Goldman Sachs in London and Hong Kong. But also, as the Cabinet Business Committee under John Key was told by the Minister for Economic Development,
a key input into the IFSDG's report was a study by the international consultancy firm Oliver Wyman that investigated the extent of the opportunity for New Zealand to become a local hub for funds domicile and administration.
That was 5 years ago, 2011. High hopes, but Treasury was sceptical, particularly of the stated benefits, and implementation was viewed as complicated, potentially protracted, and with delayed rewards. The hub was on the table, but it seems off the formal agenda. Largely unnoticed at the time, covered in business pages, it didn't receive much wider attention, and as Jerry Brownlee wrote under the report heading, obtaining broad support for the Funds Domicile Initiative, and I quote,
I am not convinced of the need to seek further specific support to proceed with the Funds Domicile Initiative at this point of time.
So that was the work the government itself was doing 5 or 6 years ago. Where do we stand now? Well, Terry Boucher is the director of tax consultancy firm Boucher Consulting. He's former tax manager at Ernst & Young, and he's worked in Australia and the UK. He's on the line now from Auckland. Terry, welcome to the program. There are over 12,000 offshore trusts currently registered in New Zealand. Surely that makes us a tax haven, doesn't it?
Well, not necessarily. I think this is the key argument around that. The key thing to keep in mind about the foreign trust regime is it was designed to stop New Zealanders doing what other jurisdictions or other countries' jurisdictions allow, or loopholes allow people to do. Now, we are a haven in that we do not tax non-New Zealand sourced income. But if any of those trusts registered here had a New Zealand bank account earning interest, it would pay tax here.
So why are those, Terry, 12,000 plus trusts in New Zealand? What do they achieve by coming here? What are they trying to achieve? What's the purpose of them being here?
There's a range of reasons around that. Many of them, the trusts have been around for centuries. And the reason they've lasted that long is primarily they are asset protection mechanisms. So many of the people who have established these trusts want to protect the assets within those trusts from potential creditors, potential maybe hide from prying eyes, and some for tax reasons. But tax laws change all the time. So setting up a trust for purely tax-driven reasons does not necessarily mean it's going to work ad infinitum. But many of the reasons I've seen around this I've heard, are in relation to wanting to keep assets out of harm's way.
Okay, so what is John Shewan going to find? What do you make also of the terms of reference of his one-man inquiry?
Well, the terms of reference are pretty much what I would have expected. Looking at this in the last couple of weeks, particularly there's an initiative from the OECD called Automatic Exchange of Information.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that, I think, was going to drive the changes that John is being asked to look at, because our disclosure regime, in particular, rules around foreign trusts are weak. It would be that is the main concern. It's not so much that the foreign trusts exist, it is that so little information has to be provided to Inland Revenue, and therefore the amount of information that Inland Revenue can pass on to other jurisdictions is immediately limited. Now, that's not to say that Inland Revenue can't get that information. And what the automatic exchange of information is going to do is require the automatic, as it says, the automatic exchange of a lot more information, including details of who are the settlors and the beneficiaries, the people who will benefit under these trusts.
So, in combination, in concert, you have John Shewan looking domestically, you have the OECD looking at the bigger picture, and New Zealand will want to be seen to be a good citizen in light of what the OECD is going to determine. What changes would you expect to see?
I would expect that we would move to require more disclosure, that the current requirements will be expanded to include details of the settlor, all the residents, the tax residents of any settlors, and details of who the beneficiaries are. And probably also, further on, more requirements about which beneficiaries have actually received benefits or distributions from a trust.
Terry Boucher from Boucher Consulting, who was a tax specialist. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.